2 is citizens' comments. It's an opportunity for citizens to address the commission. Do we have any emails or phone calls or nobody here in the audience? So, okay. Item 3 is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine, considered routine, will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these issues unless a member so requests, in which case the item will be moved to the consent, from the consent agenda and considered under section 4. Items moved from the consent agenda. So, so items A and B are approval of the meeting minutes from April 24th and the approval of the Lewis and Orchards Irrigation District as a future agenda item. That we had a chance to go over everything. Okay, so all in favor of approval
Would
of
you
the...
like a motion? A motion to approve the consent calendar?
Yes. Second?
I don't think I can I?
Yep, you can.
Oh.
I can.
second. Sorry,
Okay.
I thought I wasn't allowed to.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, so item 4 is director's report. So item A is high reservoir update.
Yet again.
Here we are again. Same room.
Yes.
So if you guys, I think it was in your packet, the video clip, I think it was about 45 minutes long, about outlining the details of the system. You can see on the screen there, and we have paper copies, that basically we have the low system, the high system, and the west system. So generally the low system is unimpacted by the reservoir rupture, so that's downtown and North Lewiston. They have well 1A basically serving everything, and well 1A is just kind of just north of this building here. The high system is ground zero of where we can't get enough water. So if you look at that exhibit, everything's got to be forced from the west system. So it's feeding in through some basically we tap some new lines into the system to feed it more in. But those are not distribution mains generally. They're just service. They're not service lines, but they're smaller neighborhood network water mains. Primarily, I think they're all 8-inch in size. So 8 inch is basically your minimum size for water mains. So when people talk about why can't we alternate watering days, even an odd day, even an odd address numbers for certain days, we can't get water to those residents fast enough through the distribution network. We have source water, so when you talk about Lloyd, Man Lake, they have source water issues. They can't provide enough water on that day. We have 3 wells, well number 7, well number 6, and well number 5, that are all producing basically water for all of the high and west system. And so we can turn those things on 24/7, get you all the water you want. We just can't get it distributed back into the high system fast enough if everybody turned on their sprinklers at the same time.
Because it goes empty, right?
What's
So
that?
if I'm understanding, it goes empty. If everybody turns their sprinkler
Yep,
on, it goes
yep.
empty.
It's
And then
just.
now it's just not gonna fill to continue to give
Yep,
them.
it's trying to suck too much water through its tiny little straw, and so as it's the back pressure into that what is now a distribution main at 8 inches that's undersized, the draw from Normal Hill basically drains that line, puts too much negative pressure on it, and it would go negative pressure and possibly collapse.
It's hard to get people, I'm trying to explain that as best I can to citizens.
Yeah,
I wanna be
it's,
sure.
and then the other comments I started getting is that, well, we're really screwed if we don't have enough large water mains, and it's, with the distribution system is set, as you can see, to drain from high reservoir into Normal Hill and all of that stuff, basically north of Bryden Canyon generally, from Bryden Canyon to the peak of Normal Hill, which is right outside our window there. That area is generally served by high reservoir. So once high reservoir is back online, the system will act like it normally does, and we'll be good to go. We'll have a brand new water treatment plant, we'll have some mains, new water mains downtown. This has just been a hiccup, a large hiccup of, improving the system to get it modernized.
Does it basically open up more pipes then once that happens? And it kind of opens up more?
Yeah, I mean, we over the course of the last even 5 years, we've modernized the system so we can backfeed water in from different areas. And we'll continue to do that as we find more efficiencies in it. More stored water in the system is always better. So it will go back to the way it was before we took the water treatment plant down, or before even High Reservoir collapsed. It will go back to normal, and people will be able to irrigate all they want. And what people want from Public Works is to not see or hear from us. And
Well, I
so,
think that, like you said in the meeting, it was last night, or a couple nights ago, it was like, no one even really knows where their water comes from or what's going on until there's a problem, right?
Yep.
Now they're like,
Yep.
oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
I didn't even know that's how I get my water, and why can't they do this?
Yep.
Why can't,
Yep.
and so this is definitely education for all.
yeah, and you can see, this map is it's not geographically spaced, it's just a
Yeah.
network. But when we start talking about relaxing irrigation restrictions, I know people are upset because, it's the high system. The high system is drawing out of the west system, and it can't keep up with the demand. Where the west system, it has the water in there. It's got to feed high system, so we're not sure how much water we can relax, but well 5, that's the one that now can backfeed into other areas of the system. Well 5 is its own sustained system. We can probably look at relaxing that. Same with the up there at Country Club. All those different areas out there on Palisades, Duffy, Hell's Gate, all areas that are less impacted by the loss of High Reservoir. They're still short water because that water is now going into the high system. But I think people think it's unfair that west system is going to be the first one considered for relaxations in the or the irrigation restrictions. Not to say that we can't get the high system, but I think the approach right now is today is the first day of the sun coming out after 4 or 5 days of sustained lightning storms and rain. The demand has dropped off considerably. I think it's probably, the majority of that is because of the rain, not the restrictions, but we'll find out as the weather starts warming up. When we start seeing how the system balances out, we'll tweak the knobs, look at what's understandable, because like I keep saying, we can't put out a relaxation method for the irrigation restrictions that's not understandable. People need to say, okay, my address is this, I live in this neighborhood, I can water on Tuesdays and Thursdays for up to 2 hours or whatever it is. Because once we're gonna start slowly, as the temperatures start rising out, we're gonna look at relaxing some of these restrictions. But if we go too fast, too fast, we may not be able to pull it back fast enough. Because once you go over the line, you have a failure in the system, and that means another boil order, and we don't wanna get that far. So we're going to be conservative, but we know we can provide, there's additional capacity in the system.
So with the boil order, like you said, if we had to go into another boil order, now we have something else that fails, and we already had issues getting this up and running because of parts, and so will we run to even longer times because now we.
This would be more of a traditional boil order where you have a main water distribution main failure. You typically don't have a reservoir failure.
Okay, so it's not
So
as dramatic.
it depends how big the failure is.
Well,
If you
yeah.
have a large inaccessible stretch of pipe that has failed and it's at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning, that's gonna be a difficult one to get equipment and parts and people, and if it's a large spans, it could be. But normally, when you have those pipe failures, it's isolated to a particular neighborhood. We can isolate that area by the valves and shut them off. They will have no water. The rest of the neighborhood will be in boil order until we get the back tees back. But that's a more traditional boil order that we are more familiar with.
So you're talking about like a collapse of pipes?
Yep.
That's what you mean, because I'm like trying to figure out, I know why we had the boil order because, well, the reservoir was open to air
Yep,
and that
yep.
kind of thing, but that's totally taken out. But you're talking about a total collapse in a section of pipe.
Yep, or
And
just
that would happen because we
Overdrew.
run it dry.
overdrew the system, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, and so what you're talking about in plain English is the possibility of being able to irrigate in other neighborhoods as we're gonna evaluate that weekly or whatever,
Yep,
as the temperature rises, which
Yep.
it's gonna here in the next week.
Yep, my commitment is every week we will have an update as far as how the system's responding based off of the temperature and the demand that the irrigation is having on it. I know, I said this a week ago, or not last week, I said we're probably at least 10 to 14 days out because I knew trying to get everybody informed on the irrigation restrictions, getting the warnings out. I knew there was gonna be cold weather last weekend. Probably this time next week, we'll be looking at how that's, having an update, having a plan.
Have you or the city considered, like a direct, connection with, like, the Tribune? As far as being able to, as opposed to, not to take the council out of anything, but taking a step out of that communication, going from you to the council to the public, as opposed to just saying, you know, like, for the summer with the paper saying, hey, water corner or something like that.
Yeah,
you know?
that's not a bad idea. I'm working with the PIO, right, and the Public Information Officer.
Right. Carol.
To have just basically a template, so update on reservoir, update on irrigation restrictions.
COVID and all that stuff.
Yep, so it's just you get used to reading the lines, it's the same heading, but this is the update. Last week it was this, and, yep.
That kind of, okay.
And that would be a
Just
bad one to see if, you know, how I can get it incorporated in with the newspaper. I hadn't thought about
Sure,
that, 'cause
obviously, I mean, you'd want approval through the council to move forward with that, but.
And I just, on the public messaging, because I got the email from the city with regards to the high water reservoir, and so it talked about mandatory restrictions, but it didn't get down till the latter part, that the mandatory irrigation restrictions, just tying it, weren't down to the bottom where it said it was because of the high reservoir. It should kind of lead because of the high reservoir, you know, being down and the construction timeline this, we need to do da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then, so just the qualifier on top, so people, because it was like, not, you know,
Oh, yeah,
not, it's.
People read like the front couple sentences, right?
Yeah.
And then they're
They
just.
read
Well,
the
well,
headline.
Well, because everybody gets, you know, it's that instant reaction,
Yeah.
you're going to get,
I'm
what do
guilty
you
of
mean
that.
mandatory? You know, they're going to react to that part of
Right.
it. I mean, I would, I mean,
Yeah.
you instantly kind of get that, you know, anger, and so saying, well, it's because of reservoir failure, but, you know, it's planning to be this, because you're present, and that's why I kind of had a couple questions on your presentation. So I have like three things. So number one, one thing that people do not understand is correct. It's not a source issue, it's a distribution issue, but it's not a matter of pipe systems. It's a matter of how you direct those systems based on these three systems. And so it's not a lot of people realize or understand that. But the thing that really caught me, and this is my main question for today, well number 7. You said is at 80% capacity and ran 18 hours over a hot weekend. Now, was that was in a 24-hour cycle, or was that in a 48-hour cycle?
the 24-hour cycle.
24 cycle, 18 hours. So, well number 7 is right next to the high.
Center of
on the
high system.
Oh, you're looking on the
So
other.
it's 2,100 gallons per minute. So, based on that, though, having dealt with old wells in the past and having had failures of wells and stuff, how old is that well? And is it a centrifuge type well, or what type of well is it, and how old is it? And has it ever had to exert itself to this level?
It is a brand new well,
Oh, thank
so
you.
it's not even, I don't know exactly
Where is
kind
it
of.
physically located?
It is, that's the one that they drilled right behind the mall on Nez Perce Grade.
Okay,
Oh.
yeah, that is brand new.
Yep. Yeah, so it's not even a year, it's just now a year old.
Is
Oh,
the pump at the
fantastic.
bottom or the top?
What's that?
Is the pump at
It's
the
at the bottom.
bottom? I thought we didn't want that.
No, it's at the top. You're right. I'm not a well expert. I'm not gonna.
I'm just, cause I know that, cause pump at the bottom means time
Yeah,
to get it
yeah.
out.
Yeah,
And we're pump at the top, cause the pump is the fail,
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
and then,
no, you're right. I believe it. But I'm
Okay, so
gonna
that's the
plead
brand-
ignorance on the type of well and the details on the well. I know.
Okay.
The other thing about well number 7, so between and 7 is more center into the system, where 5 and 6 are further to the south. So well 7 is gonna be the workhorse, basically feeding the high zone. And ironically, well 7 dropped significantly since that report. It's been down in like the 30s. In
Right.
fact, it was 30% capacity, 30% use. In fact,
Okay.
over the weekend, the operators balanced it out. It even shut down for a good part of last Sunday because there was less demand on it. And we balanced the system out with 5 and 6. And so trying to find the right indicator, and there is no indicator, because you can, like I said, we can keep that well going forever, or at full capacity. It's the tiny pipes that it's distributing, that's the pinch point. And
Right.
so, but no, well 7 is brand new well,
Okay.
high producer, good water, and in the center of the system, which is why we built it where we built it and why it was spec'd that way.
Okay, so that's great news because of the capacity, and I wanted to make sure, just like I said, having had wells fail before, and
Yeah, we've had.
you're panicking, trying to
gone
get
through
those
that,
types of
yeah.
things.
Yeah, well 6, which was our old workhorse, which is up by the golf course, that's the one that was originally drilled in cooperation between the golf course and the city, and the city parks / golf course / public works / water department drilled that, I think, in the 80s. Now water has taken over that well. That one has a funky, there's a
Not straight.
yeah, the shaft is not straight, and that one has a lot of breakdowns. We have a spare on hand just for this. So last year when we were on the trailers, the temporary trailers at the water treatment plant, in preparation for last summer, knowing that if the treatment plants or the temporary trailers go down, we would need as much water as possible. We got spares on just about all of our wells.
Nice, okay. And then the other question I had is I wanted to make sure I understood your presentation about what I guess this is the permanent fix, and this is where I got kind of confused in the presentation between the questions and stuff. It looks like you're not repairing the roofing. You're going to go to a mod tank for temporarily, or is that the permanent? Because I got a little lost when you were going back and forth about what the final tank was going to be, and then you said fill it and put a floating lid on it instead of a wood structure.
Yep.
So can you just clarify all of that a little bit of what is, it sounds like you have determined a final design. Is it still going to be the same capacity level as what it is right now? And then based on that, the timeline, which I thought I heard you say July, I wanted to see if that's what I understood.
Yes, so, the shortest so when we were going to just basically reuse the reservoir as is, patch the roof, patch the concrete, throw back the earthen berm, we went in there the consultant went in there and found there's some dry rot, there's some non-standard, I shouldn't say, it was standard when it was built, it doesn't meet spec now. Trying to find a way to tie in the patches into the roof structure was what gave us the most fits. And so they were not able to find a solution that was gonna meet our timeline, keeping the existing structure as is and reusing it. So that's when they called me, said, yeah, we can't do that. We gotta find the next solution. So the next solution, option 2, was that Modu tank. The problem with the Modu tank was just not enough room for it up there, and it would only give us like 300,000 gallons. The Modu tank is exposed to all the elements, doesn't provide, it's a true Band-Aid fix. It would only last maybe 2, 3, 4 seasons at most, and not enough volume anyway. So the benefit of the Modu tank was you wouldn't have to tear down or demo anything at the existing reservoir, so you could build that. We weren't keen on that because that was basically $1 million that we were just throwing out the window just to get through irrigation season, maybe this one and next one. Immediately, the contractor went back and said, well, what happens if we just take the roof off the structure and do a floating lid? And so that's where we're going now, is the Modu tank is off the table, reusing the existing reservoir as is off the table. What they're doing, I think, tomorrow, and even today, is just cutting that roof off, demoing it, taking it out, taking all the steel columns that are inside that tank, holding that lid up, or holding the roof up, making it flush, fixing the existing pipes, and then doing the same design that they had considered with the original as far as the new patch to the actual concrete tank. We get that all in, then they have a liner that would go in there.
Inside the concrete.
Inside the
tank.
concrete. So yeah, there was some delamination within the concrete, and they weren't sure how it would react, because it's the same thing as the pipe. That reservoir has been a pressure vessel holding water in on it for 100 years. It's been empty for 3-4 months. The concrete's starting to do what it's gonna do, and they weren't confident enough to know that, well, if we just fill it, is it gonna leak? And so with a liner, we're good. So
What type of liner again?
it's a or a poly, it's a thick plastic liner.
Okay,
Lifespan of that.
that was my next
Just
thing.
put that Flex Seal Wax.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
Go next.
So the liners, those are, the whole system has a warranty for 20 years. And then the floating lid on top of that is what the critical path item, because we can just get the liners pretty easy to get. It's just thick plastic. They were out there actually getting measurements this week. But it's the floating
How
cover.
expensive is the liner?
It's in the report.
Just a rough.
Yeah, both the liner and the lid, I don't have it with me, it was an additional $1 million.
Okay.
So I think it was like 600 and 400.
So that'll be put into a depreciation fund in the water enterprise thing, so in 20 years,
Yep,
they'll
yep.
drain it.
I think in the discussion that we had, one of these meetings, probably not the one that was on the videotape, was with a warranty on this for 20 years, the way the system, the analogy I've used, and you can see the circle on there, when high and low reservoir were built, there was no population to the south. And so, and the population to the south is at a higher grade point. So, our system needs to be updated. And so looking at the silver lining that we don't need 4 million gallons, actually 8 million gallons between high and low reservoir. We don't need that much storage sitting right there. So this 20-year life, I mean, we'll still have a reservoir there that still will feed high system. And with a modern treatment plant, maybe we only need 1.5 million, 2.5 million gallons there, but we have a booster pump that will feed water, more southeast from there and into a much larger tank that we'll use for distribution. But that's a future now. We're actually gonna analyze that as part of the system upgrades once all of the current upgrades were completed. So I think that will give us, the time to look at where the water system needs to go to manage, population growth over the next 20 to 50 years.
I think
In
the question
July?
was how we're paying for it, right?
Well, I just said, if you have the 20-year life and that, at that point you need to start replacing it,
Yep.
I'm assuming you're going to put some sort of depreciation, puts that money aside through the water enterprise fund so that, obviously, we've learned that this is a very key reservoir for the whole water distribution system, that one obviously needs to be kept up
Yep.
for the entire, for the entire system, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is it really gonna be done in July?
Yes, critical path item is the floating cover. And so the work on the ground will take a month or two. You know, people could say, you need to be working around the clock. We are at the mercy of the supply chain. So, you know, they need to take the measurements and engineer the floating cover. There's components to it. There's a gutter system and a sump pumps that go into it. I'm not quite entirely sure. I haven't seen anything from it, but they have to engineer it, manufacture it, ship it, install it. The early indications where they will start manufacturing it in the beginning of June. If we get it pushed sooner, or it could get bumped back, that is the critical path. So if that thing shows up 3 weeks earlier, we will get it in 3 weeks earlier than we said. But they said the estimate they gave, which was July 31st, of when we would start putting that reservoir back online. They said that July 31st date is our best estimate, our best. It's not super conservative, but it's not overly optimistic. And that's just in the discussions, again, with the manufacturer from the floating cover. And the good part, I don't know if it's a good part, and that's part of the updates that we'll give to the community. One, hey, we got a call from the manufacturer, there's been a delay in getting materials, so things are looking, people don't usually pay that close attention to public works projects, but this is one where I wanna be out there and say, you know.
Until something happens.
Those
You guys need
roundabouts.
to shine more, you know, you need to be out there more.
Yeah, I wanna be optimistic and say, I really wanna see us finish before the end of July, but I have nothing to give
Well,
It's
I think-
easier to say it's done sooner than later.
I think the nice thing is you're not saying something like it's gonna be a year or two, you know, this is something that it's a little bit more immediate, and that I think helps calm people too.
Yeah, and what kind of pushed this project into this design was this is not the Maju tank where we get through this irrigation season, then we have to come back and still have a problem to solve. This will take care of itself for 20 years. I mean, that's warranty. That's not the design life. It's we can probably get another decade out of it.
Oh,
But
wow.
So,
Nice.
on that, I mean, I know 20, 30 years seems like a long time.
Right, and
Um, when do we start, cause I mean, this one lasted 100.
yeah,
Do we have, I mean, after the dust settles and everybody's happy, all that stuff. In the next coming years, is that when we plan for what's gonna replace this? Or if we need to redo it in 30 years, that process as opposed to waiting for it to ruin people's houses?
yeah. No, that will not be our model moving forward, but the last water system master plan was done about 5 years ago. We need to update both master plans, the wastewater and water. And water storage is gonna be the big component of what that is, because, you know, we are now, for obvious reasons, looking more closely at our reservoirs, you know, just making sure that they've got all the SCADA comms issues, the overflows, paint condition. We have two tanks that need to be repainted, things like that. And I think with that upgrade, I know the transmission main that feeds from the water treatment plant up to the reservoir, that one was the next thing on the CIP. And so now the capital improvement list has gotten a little crowded again, that high and low reservoir both need to be evaluated, the transmission line. And I am optimistic that DEQ has the call for projects or letters of interest, and so we've submitted 3 of them, high reservoir, transmission main, and I can't remember, maybe it was low reservoir. We turned in 3 projects, that was over $30 million of asks. I'm optimistic that the state will see our need and help us, so that if the funding is available, that's gonna change the course of where we're gonna go. If the funding becomes available in 3 weeks, we will start working immediately, probably on that transmission line. And then letting the studies of the master plan kind of direct, moving it from there.
So I know there was like big talk when this first went and ruptured, was about, how often was it inspected? When did the last time they look at it? So are we looking at, cause I know we had the sensor and I know there was things with that, but are we looking at like a yearly, hey, someone gets out there and we check all the system and make sure visually what they're doing, or like what's?
Yeah, we were, so the general practice was underwater inspection every 5 years. And High Reservoir was due for inspection. We were, with all the upgrades and everything, we were gonna try and get them all in the cycle, and so we were gonna do them this summer. In fact, all of them but High Reservoir will be done this summer, or the ones that are due. They are inspected by operations staff annually, and most of that is, you know, like you said, is the comms, everything. Are all the lights on and all the, you know, ladders clear, weeds and roots, and, you know, you get a lot of settling around them, making sure that there's not voids or leaks or anything like that. So those are done on an annual basis by our own staff, and then the 5-year annual checks. I mean, all of those reports were all available, in the master plan. It said, you know, despite the age of both High and Low Reservoir, they were in good operating condition.
Right.
So there was no reason for us to suspect anything. There's been a lot of claims that the city knew that there was water leaking out of it. The only story, there was one where water was going down a channel, and as it was filling, water was getting out the top of it off of a side, out of the overflow, because there was a board laying there and the water was going out. And that was towards the east into that cow pasture out there. We found the problem, fixed it, and that was like in 2019, had never found any signs of any other leaking. The other one was a gutter leaked into the storage units. When we have if we suspect there's water leaking out of a reservoir or a pipe, we test it. If there's any chlorine residual, we know that's water that's from a treated source.
Oh, I see.
So when we tested the water that was in the storage units, it didn't have any chlorine. That told us that was roof drainage. We fixed the gutter, there was no more. So I'm trying to cut off all these rumors that are out there that the city knew this and was hiding it or didn't do the inspections or anything. That none of that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Next time.
other questions on the,
Nope.
and did you have any more?
Nope.
Okay.
I do have, I have a hard break at 1. I have to go, I have a Public Works budget presentation at 1:30 at City Hall, so.
Okay. Well, I think,
Sorry, one question. At the fairground, do you guys go over the difference between High Reservoir and the well and their purposes of them? I know you mentioned we have that, that's Pierce County, like open house for the kids and
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if we go into that detail.
it might be a good one.
Yeah,
for
we can
people,
show them,
so,
'cause
Just as a,
Yeah, water, I'm not I've spent most of my time with the wastewater. We have a really, Public Works Day, we have all our different, we have the signals, kids get to run through an obstacle course through signals. We have a model wastewater treatment plant, we have an exploding toilet, we have
But that might be a
stormwater,
good
but yeah,
one since
I don't
it's
know what a water.
on everybody's brain,
Mhm.
how it works. Anyway, that was it.
No, it's excellent.
okay, all right, thanks. So item 5A is discussion items, draft ordinance 4882, stormwater drainage system. So, has everybody had a chance to go over what's supplied?
Yep.
You have anything, Dustin, to?
I don't have anything other, I mean, I presented it to council at the work session. Just a general overview for anybody who may be watching. This is the ordinance that basically describes the right and authority that the city has to create a stormwater utility, outlines the different reasons why it's necessary, the user fees, the definitions. I have my crib notes here somewhere, but this does not set the rate. It is an unspoken, or it's not. The rate is set by a separate resolution that will be adopted in the late summer, August. So every August, we update our utility rates, and so that's when that would be set. The plan is for the stormwater utility to kick in basically January 1st of 2024.
I do have So when we had the first, I don't know what the pamphlets said when they came out to the citizens, because I just know that they went out, but I don't actually know what they said. Some of the feedback was just like, why did this all of a sudden come about? And obviously we know because of the federal regulations coming down the pipeline and everything. I'm just wondering if that might have been good to have on there as an informational piece, just because now they felt, oh, great, now another reason for you guys to collect money from us.
Yep, I hear it on a daily basis of, property taxes are high.
Right.
The city's just coming after for more money. And yeah, the timing is not great at all.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't,
I apologize, I forgot, I did bring.
Oh.
Oh, thank you. Was this what they went out to people?
yeah, those were
Okay, thank you.
the surveys and kind of just giving the public just kind of outlining why it's necessary, what the money, what the utility money would be used for, and then asking for feedback.
Oh, so
So
you
we-
kind of said it here that it is requirement towards by
Yep.
PC. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
just more of a understanding. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so,
So,
yeah,
to go back to like what I was talking about, in the beginning, during the lawsuit, one of the things that is that, pay for some activities that were not entirely storm water related, such as street maintenance and rebuilding, and what constituted stormwater activities, and those things are specified. But when it talks about street maintenance, obviously, when you cut into a street to go after stormwater, the pipes underneath streets, well, first of all, are there stormwater pipes underneath streets? Okay, so if you gotta cut into a street, that's, money has to go to repair that.
yep.
And obviously, we're not talking about street sweeping or rebuilding unless we have to dig out that much. So, and then, I guess, the providing stormwater drainage services. What are the specifics of that?
Stormwater, so I would assume that would be the maintenance of that water conveyance system and treatment. So, if it's catch basins, those have to be, cleaned regularly, the lines have to be flushed. Street sweeping is partly a storm, because if
Keep things out.
yeah, to keep things out of before it gets into the system, you sweep them off the street before they get in there. So it's just basic maintenance of the system that has more or less been under invested in for the last beginning of when the infrastructure was installed.
Sure. I mean, it's just been done periodically.
Periodically, yeah. I mean, and that's what this federal stormwater permit requires the city to do, that you, a lot of this is just documenting the efforts that you've done. How many catch basins did you clean out and inspect? How many miles of streets did you sweep? I mean, that is literally part of the permit that you,
And that's the MS4.
that's the MS4 permit, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and that's that Lewiston Independent School District #1 versus City of Lewiston that's referenced out here, line by line specifically calls out the finding of the lawsuit and why this is not the same thing.
Sure. Okay.
And it's very, it's, I think I said it in the work session, it is, a utility is a paid utility for a service, just like your wastewater and your water. You're paying a utility for the maintenance and upkeep and investment in the storm sewer system.
Okay, so I guess my next question is, what's the formula for my stormwater contribution to
Yep.
city as a whole?
Yep.
Because, pumping water into my house that I use, that's by a meter. There's no meter.
Yep, and that is exactly the challenge. Wastewater's kind of like that, but you're still, because wastewater, you're paying a flat rate, at least in Lewiston, you pay a flat rate.
Right.
We don't meter the wastewater, just because it's difficult.
Right.
What stormwater does is establishes an equivalent residential unit, so an ERU. And so Lewiston has gone through and kind of mapped out the city as a whole, and found generally, and I don't have I might have the figures in front of me. I think is it 4,500 square feet of impervious? Yes. 4,500 square feet of impervious area, so that's roof, sidewalk, driveway, things. So basically assuming that your house will have roughly, you may have less, you may have a little bit more, but an equivalent residential unit will be about 4,500 square feet of impervious area. So you take that 4,500 square feet of it, and so each residential utility account will pay 1 ERU. And that's when we start talking about, proposed rates that are, anywhere from $570 to $1,060 a month. That's 1 ERU is that rate. When you get into commercial areas, I keep picking on the mall, you have acres of concrete or asphalt and roof. I have no idea how many ERUs that is, but there's no, as far as I'm aware, the mall does not have any modern modern stormwater retention detention, and so that ERU equivalent rate is spread across that, and that's how they pay, because that water, the reason it's impervious area is because that water is not gonna soak into that soil whatsoever. It's gonna shed right into the municipal storm sewer system,
Right.
and that's what we're maintaining.
So I know we need to kind of go through the ordinance. I had a couple questions, because I have a couple concerns within the ordinance with regards to some of the wording and, just some clarification, because a couple items kind of don't make sense. But I just had a couple quick questions listening through to your presentation. Do you have an estimate right now of how many residents and businesses will be impacted by this fee, just roughly?
I don't off the top of my
Okay.
head. I know we do. So the work group that we have,
Because
right?
I was trying to go through the task force meeting, and I hadn't finished
Yeah.
everything. I got through the memo, and I saw all the suggestions and things like that, but I didn't get a chance to finish all of that reading. I got through the stormwater master plan, so I have a little bit of understanding, but I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, so we have a pretty large work group right now of city staff and the mayor. And so there's my public works, and then we have a stormwater coordinator and we're kind of handling, I'm handling, the public side, but Jeff, the stormwater guy, is handling permit compliance in capital and budget. But we also have, our GIS
Right.
team and they have all of that data, and then kind of, dovetailing that into our utility billing, because it's just gonna get rolled into our regular utility bills.
Okay, so it's gonna be incorporated, because that was another question I had. So it's just gonna be part of that utility bill that goes out monthly? Okay.
Yep, and the problem is, it's easy to, just come up with a system, but there's always exceptions. Lots that don't have a water, they don't have any other, they don't have any other services. There's a couple lots like that. Lots that are in Lloyd, because they don't get a water bill, but they maybe get sewer and sanitation, and there's just,
Right.
when walking through all the
Well,
exceptions.
there's an expression, there's an expression is we're all downstream. So I know people don't like the idea of an additional fee or, however, I pay for a school district, but I don't have kids, it's kind of one of those things. We're all kind of trying to, deal with an infrastructure that people don't identify as an infrastructure. And I think that's where it's kind of really critical, is that this is an infrastructure, because I remember in the presentation on the 27th of March, one of the things you said that was very fearful to you is the line down 21st Street. And if that line fails, because of how you described it, was basically a corrugated pipe that was put into a ditch, it was covered up. And my question was, is that in the roadway, or is that under the right-of-way, or is that onto the properties that were then sold for businesses to line up and down there?
Yep.
So which?
It is in other properties.
It's
So
under property, so.
For 21st Street, there's not a lot of storm drainage in the street. The two pipes that run down, primarily draining from Nez Perce Plaza down, go directly, there's right under the mall, right under Subaru on that side. They go all into the buildings. Eventually, they get back into 21st Street.
But they're under
Private
they're under, businesses and other,
Yep.
okay.
Same thing with Joe Hall
So-
Ford and Toyota.
So, and I was looking through, it doesn't look like, based on the master plan and some of the reading I did, you haven't had a chance to put cameras in there to, you did a little bit up on Thane from what I understand, you've identified and looked at those with cameras, but a lot of the system has not been looked at. So those pipes, camera has not gone through yet, is that correct?
Some of them, yes. The one on the west side I have seen, yes.
And as we know, that type of piping does fail. It's, it's got salty water going through it, so it's going to eventually erode out. So we don't know, and from what I understand, 26 to 100% of the system is in poor condition. Okay, if that fails, similar to, and I'm just trying to kind of set that up a little bit because of the ordinance and everything. If that fails and, things fall into that, what type of dollar amount could it be? Are you talking like $500,000 or $250,000?
The one, so there was a failure on the east side under Joe Hall Ford. So if you go Taco Bell and you go straight back into that parking lot, that's usually.
Is that 17th?
I think you're right, yeah.
Okay.
There was a failure right there, and there's pictures from this.
Basically a sinkhole,
It's
isn't
a
it?
massive sinkhole,
Yeah.
and, because those lines are 20, 30, 40, 50 feet
Right.
deep. And so they're called it a point repair, where they just went down, fixed the collapse, and as they got in there, they saw how bad it was and realized they didn't have the budget to chase that under Joe Hall Ford's building and how far it
Right.
went. So they brought it, they fixed what they could, and then we started budging it. I mean, that project now is it's somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million estimate.
That's what I thought.
To do it, and that's,
That's a 24-inch line or a 36?
I'm not sure at that location.
36-inch currently.
Yeah, okay.
36? So,
Well, it's 36, but that pipe.
It's, depend where
No,
you
I-
measure.
Partially
I
collapsed,
get
yeah,
it. And that's where sometimes sleeving them is, as I understand, that's kind of part of the new technique is they sleeve it now
Yep.
because trying to get through and go underneath all of those locations, you can't dig them out. So
Yeah.
you're gonna have to sleeve some of it.
Some
or
of those
whatever.
have spring water that you're never, I mean, even if we divert the flow into 21st into a more modern system,
Right.
you got spring water in there, so you'll probably line them to preserve them, but to not put any additional flow in them.
Because the estimated cost in 2018, I think it was, for 21st Street was 2.7 million. And it probably is up now, even higher. Okay, so that just kind of putting that sort of foundation, kind of thinking that through for this ordinance. A couple things, I think in a couple locations, we need to change the language. I think we need to put the word infrastructure in here. So people that when they are reading it, they're understanding that this system is an entire infrastructure, just like water, just like sewer. It is, so on page 7 of 17 on the ordinance, item number 4, it says a city maintained system of, and I think it should be a city maintained infrastructure system of ditches, channels, culverts, swales, and things of that nature, because you will be responsible for the maintenance and repair and fixing of all of those various things. 7 of 17 of the ordinance. Not on the
Okay.
right-hand side where it says page 15. Because mine are all blurry. I don't know why they're all blurry, but mine are all blurry.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the next part of it, I think that where it says municipal stormwater runoff, I think municipal should be removed because it's not just a municipal stormwater, it's everybody's stormwater. Otherwise, they'll kind of single it out that it's just roads and things of that nature. And like I said, these are just kind of my suggestions after reading this extensively. One of my concerns was you have the MS4 permit identified as a definition, but going forward, it's only identified once throughout here, and I think that needs to be highlighted in a couple more locations. And then the other thing in the definition area is you don't mention anything about 100-year storms and the impact that can be based on some of the drainage system. And I think somehow that needs to be incorporated, is the 100-year flood situation. The pictures are quite traumatic when you see the flooding downtown, and I don't think people realize how interconnected all of this system is, and that's what causes the flooding and whatnot down there.
Plus our roads, it's not good on our roads too.
Exactly.
You want better roads, this is gonna help get us get better roads.
Exactly. And then on page 8 of that, I think we're on the stormwater creation section where you have, it was shall have the regulatory authority responsible planning, design, construction, maintenance, and operations. I think you need to add NPDS programs and education. And that will reflect later on for the enterprise fund because you referenced the permit in the first, the MS4 permit at the beginning, but there's not a lot there. I read through your MS4 permit. It's not crazy, but there's a lot there to absorb. You have analyticals you're gonna have to do, you have to do outreach, you have to come up with an illicit discharge program. You have to do the construction activities, that means changing your engineer standards. There's a lot of time that's gonna be involved that you're gonna have to pay for consultants or everything else. And that kind of needs to be identified as part of this ordinance, so people understand. I already asked that question. On page 10 of 17, under F, the second paragraph, it says the burden of proof, this is the second sentence in under the second paragraph, the burden of proof for the initial and ongoing credit eligibility shall lie with the customer. My question on that is this an annual application that they have to submit, or is this a one-time?
It's a one-time.
It is a one-time,
Yeah.
okay, because I couldn't kind of follow that, because then
Yeah.
it says the burden of proof and then eligibility,
Yeah, this-
30 days after receiving the application.
This area has gotten a lot of scrutiny just because of how that process goes. And the appeal process and who's eligible and all of that other stuff, so yeah.
So I think that just maybe a little clarification, and it's just a couple small wordsmithing, just so that they realize it's a one-time, that you don't have to say one time.
Yeah.
Under the exemption from the user fee, which is item G down there, the one sentence that's a little confusing, item 2, it says it is served by its own stormwater system such that real property owners' runoff does not discharge into the cities. Eventually, everybody, I don't care if you have loans or something, and this goes to when you have a lot of water or something like that, we've seen it. All of a sudden, water comes off, it's gonna trickle over here, it's gonna trickle, unless you have some massive, every homeowner has a massive detention basin for, and again, I'm going back to the 100-year flood. So this is where I think there needs to be some sort of, understanding that under certain rain conditions, everybody's property is, you will have overflows. We all,
Yep.
it just all
And that's-
comes over and comes down.
That's been how we've explained it to people who, well, I've built modern, retention, detention facilities. Well, no, I mean, yes, you have, but they've been built to a 20-year storm.
Right.
And eventually, when yours is overtaken, it will spill into the city system. That exception would be extremely rare circumstance where the property tips outside city limits, or the street is higher than the actual residence, that it physically cannot drain uphill into the stormwater system. So there's a few handful.
But still, as I was, when you look at your watershed, okay, and that's what people have to understand is this place is a hill. Eventually, everything all the way down is going to trickle down to some sort of creek or tributary. And all those tributaries go into one of the 3 main creek systems that's gonna discharge either out into the Snake or it's gonna discharge out into the Clearwater.
Yeah.
So when it is a watershed, and that's why I said it all goes downhill eventually somehow. You might not discharge directly into that, but the problem is based on how your permit is written and your tributaries, somehow, some way, somebody's property is going to discharge into one of your areas.
Yep.
And reading your analytical section, you're gonna be pulling samples, or hiring a consultant, I should say, be pulling your samples so that you're testing for those parameters that are outlined there. So that's why I'm kind of saying, there might need to be sort of a description of that in your definitions in the beginning part, is 100-year possibly watershed and people understanding that. I know time's running out, so I'm trying to get through this quickly. On page 13 of 17, this area really concerned me the most. Item D, expenditures on system expenses only. It says, of this section shall only be expended on operations, maintenance, and other expenses, including regulatory compliance. Okay. Regulatory compliance goes back to the definition in the beginning, and that's basically code standards and things of that nature, some enforcement. The problem I see here is when you look at the original definition and you look at here, you don't talk about planning, you don't have design, you don't have education, you don't say anything like that probably should be added is MS4 permit activities and requirements. Because when you're looking at your permit, and your permit is going to change because April 3rd of next year, you're going to be negotiating, it's going to add more conditions. So referencing back to your MS4 permit, in addition to all the other things that you have to do, should be really heavy through this area because you don't know in the future what they're going to do to you when the MS4 permit gets issued. You can negotiate and they can basically say, well, that's nice, but it's too bad, too sad, you're gonna have to do this requirement. So that is a concern there, and also having it down, expanding it a little bit more down in E as well, connecting both of those so that you have that kind of continuity between those two with how the funds can be expended. And then on 14 of 17, in the top sentence there, you have drainage services. I think you should change that to stormwater services because you have monies paid for stormwater services or accounted for in the stormwater fund. You really don't talk about drainage services anywhere. You talk about stormwater services. And then this was just kind of a side question. Since this now is a utility, I'm understanding that this probably then can qualify utility assistance programs.
Yep.
Okay, so it'll be identified through there. And you already answered the questions about the bills, and sorry, I have a lot of questions on the ordinance, so my apologies for taking everyone's time.
You asked a lot of the ones I had too, so, my, questions kind of refer to, when it talks about the fund itself, do we have an estimate, an idea of annual expenditures on just a normal, had this for a while, it's gonna take $1 million of money to maintain flush systems, that kind of stuff, keep them.
Yeah, the stormwater coordinator, Jeff Weimer, has been working on that a lot. In about a half hour, we'll sit down and
Sure.
kind of, I'll have a little bit more, a better understanding of that. It's, I took it to council and to be very blunt in that, our marching orders was to go with $10.60 per ERU for drainage basin 1 and $7.75, which is the full capital. That won't be adopted until August. We'll be working through the budget and trying to establish a budget for stormwater. My nightmare would be that the council gets some pushback, council are here, but the council gets pushback and they say, okay, actually, no, we're not gonna go with that rate. And it doesn't matter if they undercharge it or overcharge it, we'll be spending the next 2 months establishing our expenses and revenue. And then if they undercut it or whatever they do with it, that's gonna have a dramatic impact on all of the things that you talk about. So we have an idea, because there's equipment that needs to be transferred from the sweepers are in street department. They will be transferred over into the stormwater department. So they will be assets by the stormwater department. Things like that all need to happen. And that's all gonna have implications with how the budget is gonna be impacted by what the final rate is when they adopt it.
And, I mean,
Go ahead and ask a question real quick. Just follow up on your question. So are you asking what should be charged, or are you asking what the budget is based on?
I'm asking what the budget would be. I mean, do we have an idea? Is it gonna be $1 million a year, 2, 5, that kind of stuff? Because, you know, if we start with $10 and whatever cents that we charge, it takes time for that to build up, you know, and then, so I don't have a calculator, but it's gonna take a couple years for that to get to what I think would be the expenditures needed to maintain the system.
Yeah.
Let alone, replacing those pipes, the corrugated pipes that are collapsing and things like that.
Yeah, and it's between, you know, acquisition of, you know, the equipment and all that other stuff, then you're gonna need to start building, you know, your reserves for, you know, capital reserves and everything, operational reserves. Then everything that we've said, you have to be in compliance of your permit. So operations and permit compliance is, you have to fund all of that. So whatever's left goes into capital. And so, and that will tell you, for whatever reason, if we only get 50% of capital annually, that means we're just gonna be taking twice as long to start ticking off some of these larger projects.
Right, and then I know there's talk about here as far as periodic, revisions for the fee calculation. Is that gonna go on a annual basis, like periodically, or 5 years, that kind of stuff?
It'll be evaluated just like we do with all the other utilities, based off of the master plans as, you know, as we go through there and tick through the projects, inflation, better understanding of what the projects are. Yeah, I think the goal, just like we do with any other utility project, is if we can diversify. We're gonna do a stormwater, wastewater, streets, and water project, bundle that together, we have the street ripped out apart, each utility will contribute into that and minimize our costs. So goals like that, we'll kind of we'll get better bang for our buck, which will then stretch our dollar.
Right, and then, I mean, and this is probably a pipe dream, suppose we get $10 million into the fund, and there's not $10 million to expend. Or not $10 million worth of projects to fund, that kind of thing. I mean, are we gonna roll back things?
Yeah, I mean,
Or is
that's.
that just, like I said, a pipe dream?
That's
Because-
generally a pipe dream.
Sure.
What happens, an example would be right now in wastewater. An example would, so we have, wastewater has built up their funds. They did not have to tap their emergency funds like water has. So they're out ahead of everything. We have 3 or 4 capital projects that are in the queue, designed, ready to go. One is being held up by the Corps, one is more permitting. And so we have a reserve that's too big. Not that we don't have, the projects are there, we're just waiting for permits to get those issued. So we will slow that pace down. So maybe stormwater, for whatever reason, has that where the utility has built up to such a degree, but we can't get access easements to do that 21st Street until next year, or the design's been held up or whatever. And so we would just stop, the rates would just stop. You know, but the likelihood of, we're not gonna run out of projects, we'll just run out of maybe getting permitting, access, design, whatever it is. So that's the only scenario where I can see where there's a delay, besides the part where it just takes time to build up the capital fund. The second would be that we just can't get, design, access, materials, whatever it is.
And as far as the fund itself, protecting it from having monies taken out of it for other things.
Won't happen. I mean, I
can hear people talking
Oh,
about
people
that.
say that all the time, and that's one of the things, having worked in public works for 20+ years, I'm passionate about, that you cannot take water money and put it into wastewater, can't take stormwater and put it into library or police or anything like that. These utility, and we're audited on this, the utility funds, enterprise funds are specific. When you collect those funds and you identify it on the utility bill, this is for your stormwater or your wastewater or water, that goes to a dedicated account. And so it's frustrating at times because, for example, right now, wastewater's flush with cash because they've got all those reasons why water department is not. But when we're trying to replace these projects, there's still the same wastewater and water in the street. So if I want to do a capital project and fix some deficient water and sewer mains somewhere out in a neighborhood. Right now, I don't have any money to build water stuff, but I have wastewater. So, but that's just the world of public works that we live in. But I will definitively stand up and down that it is not legal, and I will not let it happen.
Sure.
That, you know,
And
that it,
my thoughts are, and I believe you, my thoughts are down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Because like I said, it's gonna take a long time for us to build up that kind of capital to be able to say, oh, this needs to be fixed. Hey, we have the money to do it right there and then if we have the materials and the permits and all
Yep,
that stuff.
yep.
When it gets there and, 20 years from now, somebody's saying, well, this has got a lot of money in it. Why are we still getting charged for that?
yeah,
Because I know when I was on the council, there were, some people were talking, literally asked those questions.
Oh, yeah,
you know.
yeah. I remember those people, yeah.
So,
But yeah, and we build, and that's where, for we did the firm was called FCS, and they did a rate study, and they do national averages and look at healthy systems, and you need a capital reserve, so when exactly a high reservoir fails, you have money in the bank, and that's exactly what we used it for. That money, people get fresh, because they see that, I think there was $2 million in that account, we used all of it plus some. Because when you're carrying these large utilities, stormwater, wastewater, all of them, a catastrophic event is not gonna be $100 or $300. It's typically hundreds of thousands or millions, and so you gotta carry that.
I mean, some people, people also try to apply their household budgeting practices to city and municipal things, and that just doesn't, they don't mix, they're oil and water.
Yep, yep.
Ryan had a question.
You kind of actually covered it. Of course, I do a lot of this stuff trying to coordinate different disciplines or different utilities. I guess wanted to get my 2 cents in that I think it is important to have a capital reserve set aside so that when you come and do, like I'm working on a Main Street water line project. The Main Street project down here is one that we've worked on. It's so much more cost effective. You can find those corridors where you need to do stormwater, you need to do water, you need to do wastewater. Problem is that most of the time the funds don't have enough money at the same time.
Yep.
And so either the project gets pushed way back to where you're dealing with increased maintenance due to further aging utilities, or one ends up getting done and you end up with, street cuts and stuff that also causes more maintenance. So, certainly, I guess I just might, you mentioned it already, but just the importance of having that opportunity, or whatever you wanna call it, kind of
Yeah.
that coordination fund, if you call it.
Yeah, there was, within the water fund, and there was the capital reserve, and then what we called the opportunity fund, and I think the opportunity fund was in water, because that's the one I'm most familiar with right now, had $1 million in opportunity, I think 2 million in capital reserve, well, the project, plus another debt, there's, the pot of money in the end of the day is all within reserves, and so it's all one pot, but it's got designations based off of how it's broken down and what they're intended to, but yeah, the opportunity fund was the one that, it's a reserve, but it's not an emergency reserve, where we have, an opportunity for a street project that we can replace the water and sewer, so we're gonna pull that, it's not in our CIP, but it's an opportunity to do it all at one time.
So, go ahead.
Okay, that was just a really quick follow-up. So how within, I know you guys have obviously the different utilities and different people kind of looking at them. One option maybe for this group, or one thing we could look at doing, is helping coordinate, you know what I mean? Like, look for opportunities where, hey, there's overlap between stormwater, capital improvement plan projects and streets or water or whatever that is. Maybe help, kind of help bring those utilities together in that planning piece of it.
I think that's where that has been kind of my push since I've got here. We have the city before I got here was investing heavily in the GIS asset management. So we're starting to see the benefits of it, where we're able to take the capital improvements for all of the utilities in the street system, overlay those, and so then you can set yourself right down on 21st Street, and you can look down layer by layer. The water's 50 years old, the wastewater's 30 years old, pavement index is this, and you can kind of get yourself a heat index map, or however you want to do it, and then you've got the URA districts that can help pay for some of this stuff and get benefit. So that helps better educate, not just because the engineers tend to get a little too rigid in how they analyze it and, we have to do this and we have to do that. Whereas the public's saying, hey, you got a new high school, we should probably push more out in this direction, or a shopping mall, something to help better educate the technical people of where that can go. And the more data that we have, the more power, the better decisions we're gonna be able to make.
One last, and I hope it's really fast. How much of the budget, because I know that's the next item kind of up we gotta get to, is
Okay.
how much of the budget right now of the transportation fund is going to stormwater? And if that's now freed up, that can go back to roads, is that correct?
Correct. Well, I will know in about an hour.
So right now, people don't realize that stormwater is being funded through the transportation. If this pot of infrastructure money, and it is infrastructure money, is set up, that it's going to free up roadway money.
Yep.
And that's, because I know that's another real sensitive one for everybody is, why my roads, no. I
Yeah.
said, well,
Yeah, I will, the only thing I will say on that is not necessarily, it will free up general fund money,
Right.
which in my mind would go towards streets, but it doesn't necessarily have to go towards streets. They could.
but it would.
It would free up property tax money,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
because
that
it-
was like the slide you had before, right? With
Yep.
the-
Yeah, that was, okay,
Okay,
sorry.
no, that's fine. So, does anybody have anything else on that particular thing? So,
Is the ordinance coming back here next month as well, or no?
No, I just saw the calendar, it will be, I can't remember.
22nd.
22nd,
Okay.
for the first reading. But we will roll your comments directly into the working group and.
yeah, and I mean, the first reading is just the first reading, I mean, they could be adjusted after that. So item 6 is items moved from the consent agenda, which we talked about, the future approval of the,
I don't think we pulled anything from
No,
the
it's
consent calendar, so we just go to number 7.
okay. All right, so then, so that's upcoming events, the regular meeting is, June 14th, same time.
Yep. The only thing I would add on to that is at Monday's meeting, they did the second and third reading, so we now have we added stormwater to the description of the Public Works Advisory Committee, and we can have up to 7 members now. So I have 1 application in the queue, 1 more available. I have at least 1, maybe 2 people interested in it, so if you know of anybody who is interested. I would like to do applications kind of like we did this time, try and get them all lumped together, or interviews, so I would like to have the new members on board by June 14th, but we may not be able to get interviews and then get it in council for approval before the 14th, but.
Will this meeting go a little bit longer then? And the reason I say that is because the more people you add, the more comments you will have, and it'll take a
Yeah,
little bit of time.
Yep. Typically,
Something to think about.
yeah, typically I'm good with that, but sometimes the city hall schedules meetings right up back to back. I
Yeah.
moved this one back a half hour and I'm still gonna be late.
Yeah. So B is Public Works Expo. That's 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I guess we're talking about if some of us are gonna be there.
I'm gonna go.
Good,
I would like to, I'm gonna take my kiddo. I think he'd be
I
fascinated.
think I'm gonna try and get
I'd love to try, but I'm not sure. But it's just so if we have a quorum.
I think they're gonna post it. No, I think they're just gonna do it to be
Yep.
safe.
Yep.
be safe.
Oh, that's
I mean, and
Yeah.
then even at that, we're just, we don't discuss what we're
Yeah.
doing here.
Don't even look at each other.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Oh
it's-
my gosh.
It's tough, so, yeah.
Oh my
Item
God.
C is fiscal year 24 budgeting session number 2 on May 22nd. Is this because you want us there?
Which one is this?
C,
C?
7C.
7C?
Yeah, I don't know which one's on that budget session. That's not ours.
That was our rate proposals.
Oh, that's rate proposal. That's just not, I wouldn't worry about going to that one. So Kevin and Cassie are aware of, so we do workshops, ramping through May and June. That particular one is just rates, and I asked, utility rates are not part of that conversation, because what ends up happening is They wanna know what the utility rates are. Sanitation is always last because I have to get the CPI contract numbers back from SDI, so I never have sanitation numbers. And then any water sewer rates are impacted in the budget, so I give a speech and then I have to backtrack it when I do the actual budgets for the utilities. So the only thing that's gonna be on that is like engineering, subdivision review costs. So I wouldn't worry about that one, but I will, late in June, I think it's June 27th, but we'll get you the date when I will be doing the presentation to the council. I think it's at 5:15 in June. We'll make sure you guys are aware of it if you wanna participate or even just watch. It's long and detailed and of all our requests, based off of this afternoon's meeting with the mayor of what we wanna add to the budget or
I
take
just
out
had
the
one
budget.
fast question. When I looked through the general fund expenses by department, Public Works is not listed. You have legislator, executive, human resources, legal, parks and facilities, police, fire, community development, recreation, finance, contingency, facility improvements, assigned building funds, insurance, and uncollectible accounts, but I don't see my favorite department is listed. So I'll let that go for now
Okay,
and find
yeah.
out why.
That might be an old version that
So.
hasn't been updated.
Okay, item 8, unfinished and new business, board member comments.
Comments? Comments?
I don't have anything. Okay. Staff liaison comments, that would be,
Nope, I think I got all my comments out. Like I said, new board members, possibly by next meeting, definitely by July. Budget will be ramping up, and I'm sure the next packet for June will include some of our information that we're presenting to the mayor and council. So just be looking for some like was today. This is great. More questions, feedback, things like that.
so future agenda items is this where we're gonna talk about Lloyd? Or,
I think we approved that. That'll come in the June meeting. We'll get an update on Lloyd. I was gonna ask if we could add an update on the downtown construction project. Because I know a lot of the businesses are impacted right now, and it's gonna continue to go all the way down through there. And
an update in a timeframe?
yeah, all of that, including, in the future, how stormwater will be affected by that, since, they've got a lot of gravel there and you can't. But I guess my other concern is, the timeline and everything, and Hot August Night's coming up, so just
They'll
curious.
be out of there by then.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
They're setting the curb now, or rank, to give us the update.
Yeah, the west end section of it that they're working on now should be just about wrapped up by the end of the month in the bay.
Are they
So
gonna
just making the
pave or no?
tile-overs, Yep, with pavement.
Okay,
And then the east end, which is 18th Street to Han Supply, that's gonna be the next segment, so they should actually be starting, I think they're.
just they're gonna go in the other direction, they're not gonna go downtown any further.
Nope, that's it, to
Okay.
9th for right now.
Okay.
And then the other end will start right after that, and it'll probably go through.
And that's a
June,
replacement
mid-July, something
of
like that.
water?
Water, that's just
Okay.
water.
Okay. All right, so I just need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second it.
All right, motion second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Have fun at your budget meeting.
That's always my favorite part of the year.
Apologize for being late today.